Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo. My name is Gabe Estel, and I am here with my wonderful co-host, Dennis Levi Leach and Jonathan Getz. How you doing, fellas?
Doing good.
Good to
Hola.
see you, as always. Glad to be back. Obviously, a lot's happened since our last show. We talked a little bit about the Royals last time. Obviously, Jonathan, I'm sorry it had to end that way, but still a hell of a season. And I don't know. I still think the future looks pretty bright for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me during the last episode we recorded that the Royals would be 90 feet from tying up the World Series
Right.
in the ninth inning of Game 7, I would say, okay, I'll take that. And it was a pretty remarkable run. And, a lot of these players seem to have blossomed at the right time.
Yeah.
Between Hosmer and Moustakas, granted, these guys struggled off and on throughout the season. So it'll be interesting if it carries over into next year. But some people did notice some distinct differences with Moustakas' swing. You hope that these guys can turn out to be the guys that they teased being in the playoffs and the guys that they had hoped they would be when they drafted them. They're set up to be successful. It's always hard to make it back to the World Series. It's
Definitely.
never a given.
And they'll have a target on their backs next year too.
Yeah,
you know?
Nobody will take them lightly. But what they were able to do to sweep through Anaheim and Baltimore and kind of talking some smack while they did it.
Yeah.
Or Gerard Dyson's like, we know and they know that we're not coming back to Baltimore, and he caught a lot of flack for it. But yeah, they swept them.
In my opinion, they beat two better teams than the team that they lost to, in my opinion.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, yeah,
With
but
Anaheim
they
and,
lost to
the Baltimore. Yeah. I mean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those teams had a lot of firepower, and in the end, they didn't lose to the Giants. They lost to Madison Bumgarner, son of a bitch.
I mean, it's a different world. You take that guy out of the equation, it's a different World Series.
They might have swept the World Series if you take them out of the equation.
Yeah.
But that's how it goes, and to witness what Madison Bumgarner did, even though it was against the team that you root for, it was pretty remarkable, historic. So there was no shame in losing to him.
Yeah, it was kind of I mean, granted, he was a good pitcher prior to the start of this season and the start of the World Series, but it was kind of one of those like a star is born moments. You know what I mean? Like him. Yeah, he became elite, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Just within the last 2 weeks, really.
And it makes you wonder because the Giants lost Matt Cain, early in the year.
Yeah.
I assume he was still their number one starter. Matt Cain was when he went down.
Going into the season, I'm sure.
And so it almost. I remember thinking when the Giants made it that, oh great, we don't have to face Matt Cain. That's nice.
Right.
And in hindsight, the Royals might have had a better chance because Matt Cain may have pitched more than Madison Bumgarner, and they probably would have had a better chance against Matt Cain. So go figure.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of fun, and they look good for next year. I'm kind of curious to see how much money they're going to spend in the offseason. I don't know if making the playoff, or I'm not making that more, making the World Series, playing in the World Series. Yeah. I don't know if the ownership's like, here's $20 million. You know what I mean? We're going to tack on some more money to the payroll. I don't know.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, you walk down the street here and you can almost see $20 million worth of payroll that people are wearing.
Right.
Right. It's they probably generated some serious revenue. I could not guess in any way what they generated, but between the playoff games and all the swag, I mean, there weren't people without blue shirts for a couple weeks walking down the street. It was pretty phenomenal. I think the idea is that they would spend a little bit more money, but what that means. They aren't going to go out and bring in a Max Scherzer or anything like that. Not that they really need to, from a pitching perspective, I think they'll be prudent like they usually are. Maybe spend just a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, I could see him kind of toeing the line maybe on the salary thing a little, just because they didn't have to spend a ton this year, and they were good, So
right.
I could see them maybe playing it out to get to like the All-Star break or the trade deadline, try and like figure out what they want to do if they had to.
Yeah. I don't see, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. A little bit later, but I don't see them as being like just totally busting out the checkbook and writing a check for Max Scherzer, or John Lester or somebody like that.
I mean, they aren't even really willing to do it for Billy Butler. So,
right.
No, I mean, it's they're still of the same mindset. It's still the same owners, and until you bring in a Jerry Jones, you aren't going to have that freewheeling spending.
Right. Well, hey, man. So we're going to talk. It's a good segue. We're going to talk a little bit about a recap for each team. Jonathan kind of already provided a little bit of one for the Royals, but Levi and I are going to talk about the Chicago teams, how we think the season went, as well as what we're looking forward to in the off season in order to be better for next year. So, Levi, I'm going to go ahead and let you start here, man. What do you make of the Cubs in 2014, and what are you looking forward to in 2015?
The Cubs ended their season at 73 and 89.
Mm-hmm. Both identical records for the Chicago teams this year.
Yes.
Yep.
And
well done, guys. Well done.
Thank you.
Our division, that was good.
We are
enough.
Jointly mediocre. So, yes.
Yeah. In the National League Central, that was good enough for 17 games back behind the Cardinals.
Right.
And so we were one game above 500 at home. We were 41 and 40. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would say the best three things to come out of the season were Starlin Castro coming back, Anthony Rizzo having a good comeback year, and then Chris Bryant in the minor leagues just tearing it up to where he's basically at the top one or two guys now in minor league baseball prospects.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think he's at the top of the list. I think he is. I think I saw a list a couple of weeks ago that said he's baseball's top prospect now.
He really tore it up. So a lot of people are hoping that he will be on the full team next year. Other than that, there were not a lot of bright spots. I mean, some of the pitching was okay.
Baez and Soler, right.
Yeah, I mean, Baez and Soler came. Neither one, I think, had ample enough games to show how good they will possibly be, maybe. They each had, interesting games where they hit some homers and stuff like that. Soler, I think he might take a little bit longer to maybe adjust than what Baez might, because Baez has been in the minors a little longer. And Baez kind of had ups and downs in the minors, so he knows that, like, you're not going to hit him out of the park every day. Where Soler, I think, is going to have to get used to that fact that you don't bat 900, Nobody does.
Yeah.
And you might out of the gate. It's amazing how many of these young guys, they come up and they tear the cover off the ball, and then pitchers review their swing on tape, and they're like, oh, there's the hole, and then, the guy goes like 2 for 33.
Yeah, and isn't playing in the big leagues the following year.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Once again, the Cubs had a couple of decent pitchers that kind of flew under the radar, and Hamill and
Arrieta.
Travis. Yeah, Arrieta. Arrieta, I think, was probably the brightest spot in our pitching.
He's probably, unless you acquire somebody this offseason, he's I think you're number one going into to next year.
Well, and you guys, you mentioned two guys that in the Cubs rumor mill right now that they're going after, and that is Max Scherzer and John Lester. Both those names have been tied to the Cubs in talks over the last couple of weeks, so it would be interesting to see if the Cubs could land one of those guys, because they would automatically become the best pitcher on the team, I think.
Oh, yeah. Undoubtedly. Yeah.
My only reservation on Lester is I didn't like how they ended their season, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I don't know if you throw a ton of money at the guy coming off of that kind of a performance, but they will.
It wasn't his fault.
He deserves it because of the whole year. But
yeah, the A's didn't score any. His first several starts, he was pitching lights out, and the A's just didn't score any runs for him.
They didn't have much offense. Yeah. that's. I mean, if they sign one of those, I mean, those are the two biggest free agents this offseason, really. I mean, maybe Hanley Ramirez too on the other side, but yeah, if they were to get Scherzer, that would be huge. And they've been talking about it on the radio all week, going after one of those pitchers. To me, with the Cubs, it's like I don't think you quite know what you've got yet. Exactly. So it seems like the big free agent signing would come next offseason. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know what your missing pieces necessarily are. Well, I mean, you know what you need, but you don't know how good what you have really is.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, okay, you signed Scherzer and just huge money. I mean, it's going to be.
Oh yeah.
He's going to make.
Yeah, either one of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're both going to make $20 million a year. Either one of them. You know.
Yeah.
And they're going to. Plus, they're going to be looking for 6-7 year deals. I mean, those guys are both going to get paid. And to me, it's like, well, I don't know. Like, I view the Cubs kind of like flirting with 500 next year.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's like the move you make. You know what I mean? Like, I think you finish next season at 500 or maybe a game or two over it. That's when you say, okay, we just need a couple pieces and we're going for it next year.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. This season, I don't know. And I don't know I haven't looked at the free agent list for next year, but I assume there's got to be at least one, top of the line pitcher out there.
I'm sure.
So if I were them, I would wait, to sign somebody like that.
I agree. I do feel like it seems like they're pushing the gun a little bit, pushing the issue. And they definitely don't have the mindset that they're going to be a 500 team next year. I think they're definitely gunning that they're going to be in the hunt for the division, if not the division champions, which is lofty goals. I mean,
they're going to have to win about 18 more games to make that happen. I mean,
Yeah. And one of the names over the last couple of days that also been tied to them is Russell Martin.
Oh, putting him a catcher, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I mean, I don't know if
I've liked him.
I've always liked him. I think he would lend kind of a veteran presence. Mm-hmm. I think Wellington Castillo, though, was a good enough catcher for us this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think defensively he was solid. He might not have maybe some of the offense that Russell Martin has.
No.
Obviously, but
Russell Martin's. I haven't looked at him. I assume he's at least 31 or so. I would guess. Something like that.
Yeah, he is 32.
Okay, yeah. So, like he's still a big name, so he's going to want like a 4-year deal at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Do you want Russell Martin when he's 36? I don't know if you do.
Right.
And you're paying him $15 million a year.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The offseason will be interesting to see all the moves that the Cubs make.
What do you think their biggest need is? Like, what position would you go after right away if you had to get somebody? It doesn't have to be like Lester or somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean,
what's the first need
like
area
obviously
you address?
pitching is like a good starting pitcher is a need. But if I could, I would say like a really good star power hitting outfielder, which is hopefully what like Soler will become. But I think it would be nice to have a power hitting outfielder.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, if I were the Cubs, if they wanted a starting pitcher just to kind of bolster the rotation, I would go after kind of one of those middle tier guys, like maybe like a Brandon McCarthy, or like a maybe even the guy that I don't think you'll re-sign him, but Jason Hamble, somebody like in that.
Yeah, they talked. They talked. They've already talked about him coming back.
Somebody like that.
You can have James Shields.
Yeah, I think Shields will be too expensive.
Yeah, he will be.
Yeah.
The Cubs do have a good track record though for kind of pulling pitchers out of the scrap heap, kind of middle tier guys, and making them almost upper level guys.
Everybody thought Arrieta was done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a big name when he was a prospect for Baltimore, and he petered out there.
Yeah. Liriano. Yeah.
Francisco Liriano's available. That's what the guy I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like a veteran, just to kind of bolster the rotation, and then go after the big gun next year. That's what I.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Any offensive? You said outfielder. Okay, so an outfielder, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know if there's any other position that we're totally lacking at. I mean,
You got a good infield.
yeah, I was going to say all the infield's pretty solid defensively, and I mean they're hopefully going to come around offensively. So,
Yeah. I would. Trying to think. For outfielders, I don't know. Maybe the guy I want, but he would probably be a fit for either Skyward team. Maybe Nick Markakis. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so Jonathan, you already talked a little bit about the Royals, sort of the last month or so.
Yeah.
Is there any? When a team is plays that well, it's kind of maybe sometimes a little harder to assess their needs. But what do the Royals need?
Well, it's something that was discussed frequently throughout the playoffs. Pretty much their most popular pitcher and the most popular offensive player, and James Shields and Billy Butler, respectively, were going to be free agents and probably finish with the team, and especially more heartbreaking for Billy Butler, I guess, for the kids. It's always the kids' favorite player. But he's been with the franchise for about 10 years, and they just, it might be a good time for him to see a change of venue as his numbers have dwindled a little bit. But they both shine a light a bit on some possible needs. Shields was interesting because Shields, was the guy that they traded for. They traded Will Myers, top prospect, that brought Shields and, just as importantly, Wade Davis over to Kansas City. And I felt like the Royals got to a point where you have a kid riding a bike with training wheels on it, and the kid is totally afraid to take the training wheels off. And but one day you just tell the kid that the training wheels aren't even functioning. The kid's just riding the bike on their own. And that was pretty much how the Royals were playing the last couple months of the season when James Shields, he was pitching, but he wasn't pitching well. And so the Royals realized that they could do this, not necessarily without him, but that their 2 and 3 pitchers and 4 pitchers could pick up the slack and perform on their own. So as a result, they can let Shields go and not worry that much about it. You have Yordano Ventura and Danny Duffy and Jason Vargas coming back, and that helps. And you have young pitchers down in the minors, so you hope that they can compete for the rotation.
Yeah,
it probably wouldn't hurt to consider a veteran guy to bring in on the back end of things. Otherwise, you're planning on Yordano and Duffy to lead that rotation.
And I'd feel totally comfortable with those two as my 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit scary because they aren't terribly experienced, but hey, they're young pitchers. This is what you want. You want these young guys who can, you got a flamethrower and a guy who can pitch, and Duffy's been through a lot, but it seems like he's ready now and recuperating.
Is Jeremy Guthrie still under contract?
Guthrie will be back. Yeah, we call him J Guts. Around here, yeah. Jeremy Guthrie, quick story. He one of his claims to the fame here in Kansas City before the World Series was that one day it was his throw day and he didn't have anybody to throw to, so he posted on Craigslist he wanted somebody to throw to, and some guy responded and got to go play catch with Jeremy Guthrie on his throw day. Just nice. At some random park.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So and then on the offensive side of it, there is actually now discussion that they could conceivably bring back Billy Butler, but I don't know if it's just kind of romantic feelings. I don't want him to. I don't want him to have a lot of emotion in it, and that's why it's always good that these deals take place in December, because it helps separate emotion from everything. And
everybody on the series right now still. So.
Exactly, yeah, and it's like, oh, re-sign everybody, bring them all back. It's like, no, that wouldn't quite work. There's been discussion with especially with Nori Aoki probably leaving. and so that opens up a spot in right field, possibly for somebody like to bring back Melky Cabrera, who was here and he got jacked for the PEDs when he was here. But he played well for the Royals. Obviously, why
he can hit.
He can, yeah, and he's ranked.
If he doesn't get pinched, he can hit.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's thoughts about somebody like that. They aren't gonna get a guy like Victor Martinez or Nelson Cruz. It's just not an option. And probably not even Nick Markakis. So that would be a huge splash for them if they were.
Yeah.
I got a feeling Baltimore's not going to let him go anywhere though. Otherwise, Michael Kadire. I mean, geez, he's 36.
He won the batting title though.
Yeah. But I don't know.
2-year deal. 2-year high salary. That's what I'd go for Kadire.
All right. Yeah. You don't need to bring back Raul Ibanez.
No.
Maybe you bring in an Adam Dunn just to pinch it every now and again. Oh, did he retire?
I think so.
Oh, I didn't realize.
I think you're,
Happy trails.
I think you're correct,
Yeah. Yeah, for a DH, he would be, he could do one more year as a DH and get you your, he'd get 25 homers, strike out a ton. And,
25 homers and 180 strikeouts.
Yeah, right.
If not 200,
Right.
Yeah. So, for the most part, I think the Royals stand pat. At the same time, they hope that some of their younger players develop a little bit more. Christian Colon was a guy who they've been waiting to bring up for a few years now, and he finally got his chance, and he performed a bit, but he was also a bit injured down the home stretch there. So guys like that. Yeah, I think for the most part it's going to be standing pat. Right,
and also, so far, we've talked about free agents predominantly. We also, and this is harder to predict because you just don't know. Any of our teams could engineer a trade too.
Mm-hmm.
With the Cubs, I think that if they're good in a year, like I think they're going to be, I think they're going to be close to 500 at the end of next year. That's when they might have to start saying, you know what, we might need to trade a couple of these young guys, Levi, in order to get something more immediate. I'm not talking like trade Chris Bryant, but you got a ton of other stuff in the pipeline. And you might have to package a couple of those guys to get your starting pitcher, you need. Yeah. So. Yeah.
There's a lot of rumors saying Castro could be one of those guys.
Actually, if you're going to deal a dude because you've got all those other young shortstops in the system, let's put it this way. Maybe not this offseason, but I'd listen to offers on the guy.
Why not?
Yeah. Especially when his value is still high.
Exactly.
Like if he fizzles out, let him do that somewhere else. Right. Yeah, and in the meantime, you can for Castro, you could get a good starting pitcher. Or a couple really good prospects if you wanted to stay young. So anyway.
Yeah. You gotta. Sometimes you just gotta pull the trigger.
Absolutely.
I forget if Theo was the guy who dealt Hanley Ramirez. He probably was. When the Red Sox dealt Hanley Ramirez to the Marlins.
Miami, to the Marlins, yeah.
Then the Florida Marlins. Was he in? He was in the Beckett deal with who was the third? Mike Lull. Lull was also in that deal. With Josh Beckett retired. I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of those pitchers that we've kind of watched over the last probably 12 years or so are starting to hang it up. Like your Dan Herons of the world, kind of that.
Yeah. But I guess what I was getting at was that Theo is if he did actually engineer that, then he has a history of pulling the trigger to bring in those pieces and dealing the young guys.
And for Castro, now might be the time, because I think he's good, but I don't.
I see his worth at probably its highest.
Yeah. I would. It's a move you make now or next season, or just you don't make it, or you just
Yeah.
he's not. He's going to be good, but I don't think he's going to be like. He's not the next Cal Ripken or anything. You know. I mean.
No.
So yeah, you might want to. They'll probably. I assume they'll listen to offers on him this.
I could see where he would be like mid-season trade bait.
Yeah. Right.
If the Cubs are hovering around 500 or below.
Yeah, and even if a team might overpay for him in that case, you might get a contender that kind of.
Yeah.
They might be able to swing something in their favor.
Yeah.
Without losing too much. Well, with the White Sox, they kind of finished where I thought they would. To me, this really wasn't a season of that many surprises, other than Abreu's sort of rapid ascendancy. I think most people, the scouting report was very high on him, but I mean, nobody could have predicted that the guy would just tear it up. Right away.
You did. I think you were pretty high on him.
I knew he was going to be good. I knew he was going to be good, but I didn't know that he would have the best slugging percentage in the American League. At the end of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. He cooled off. His power numbers kind of cooled off a little bit towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, just a hell of a rookie season, and really a lot to look forward to. So he was a big surprise. He was the biggest surprise, even though the level that he reached. I knew he was going to be good, but I thought good meant like 15 or 20 home runs,
right.
like 275. You know,
you were hoping for this season to be like 2 seasons from now.
Yeah,
but
right.
It came 2 seasons early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be curious to see how people handle him. Will they figure him out? Are people learning how to pitch to him? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I think he's good. I don't think they're going to find a hole necessarily.
Yeah, I would say if you have almost like a whole year to go off of, and they can't figure you out, you're be good for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so, man. Because I'm looking like we got the next 8, 9, 10 years here. So bring it on. Another nice smaller surprise. You didn't hear a lot about him because the White Sox weren't that good. But we got a guy named Connor Gillespie who's turning into a pretty good everyday player. He was with the Giants, came up through their system. They were pretty high on him. He didn't pan out there. White Sox got him last year, and he was kind of sort of a stopgap at third base. And then he got the full-time third base job this year, and I think he hit 300, or he hit like in the 290s this year. So and his defense is okay; it's good enough. So I thought he was a nice, pleasant little surprise as well, and he earned enough to come back. And I think he's still pretty young; he's only like 25 or 26. So I like him too going into next year. The bullpen was the worst part of the season. We had the worst bullpen in the American League, almost the worst bullpen in baseball. We had the highest ERA in the American League and the worst strikeout to walk ratio in the American League as well. We gave up the most walks, like in baseball. So the bullpen was just terrible. There wasn't much we could do about it. It's kind of a generic phrase, but it was kind of one of those "it is what it is" thing with the bullpen. You're not gonna like make bold bullpen moves when you're a shitty team, or a mediocre team. So,
well, you're talking to a guy who had one of the best bullpens in the history of the game.
Right.
So I know what a difference it can make.
Yeah. But you know what? I was thinking. As I was taking some notes for this show, I wanted to get you guys' take on this. A bullpen is always like kind of a risky thing to spend a lot of money on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because aside from your closer, there aren't like a lot of mainstays in your bullpen.
Right.
If you get like a year or 2 good years out of a dude, great. But like your bullpen is it's not a long-term thing for those guys.
No, because those players don't want to be in the bullpen that long.
Right.
They want to graduate to being a closer
if you're a
or being a
pitcher,
starter.
you start your career wanting to be a starter, you know?
Right. And that's in the Royals came into this season with Luke Hochevar as their 8th inning guy, and it turned out that Wade Davis was willing to make that transition from being a starter into a reliever, and he was able to pitch totally differently and be amazingly historically effective. and yeah, I mean and as soon as you lock up a closer long term, they start to flame out and they get the yips and it's
Carlos Marmol.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, I mean the list could go on.
Unless you've got like the next Mariano Rivera on your hands, you don't give a closer like a long-term deal, you know?
Yeah, right? No way. Yeah, because most of the time it's like a freak of nature where it's like you suddenly realize, oh, this guy is suddenly the best pitcher in the bullpen, and no batters have really seen him before, and he just lights out for a season or two, and then he goes to shit, and they move on to somebody else.
Bobby Jinks,
Jinks.
Like,
yeah. Keith Folk.
Yeah, I mean the list it's an infinite list of people that you could put in that category. Yeah. So to go to what we need, I think they have to address the bullpen. Like I said, I don't think it's something you spend a ton of money on, but I also don't think it's something you ignore. So I assume they're going to bring in somebody. I don't know kind of what the bullpen market is like out there right now, so those aren't the guys that usually generate a lot of attention. But I think that for me, the first area I would address is we need another corner outfielder. I like Markakis. I think he's at the point in his career where I don't know if he necessarily became the player that a lot of people thought he would be, Like, because when Baltimore sucked, if you guys remember a few years ago, he was like the only thing they had.
Yeah.
And now, like, Baltimore's so good and they have so many weapons that he's kind of like down the totem pole. He's kind of not an afterthought, but he's not. He's they've got so many other guys that can hit better than him.
Right.
Yeah.
That I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna get a decent contract, but I think he's a guy that you can get like you can go like a 3 or 4 year deal. Like 3 years, like maybe 33 to 35 million. Which. When you're talking about baseball salaries, it's like, oh, that's cheap. Always kind of hard to swallow that when you say something like that. But to me, he would be a good fit in the outfield. I think he's at the point in his career where his value has gone down a little bit, but he's still got a decent number of productive years ahead of him still. So
he's won 2 Gold Gloves.
2 Gold Gloves, yeah. Good. He's a good outfielder. He hit leadoff this year, so he.
Yeah.
We don't really need him at leadoff, but he could. I think he would fill in nicely in the 2 slot. So he would be my top choice for a free agent for us to sign. And his name has been attached to the White Sox in rumors.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they're considering it. Also, I think our other area is we need a DH. Dunn is gone. Abreu's going to play first base. Konerko retired. I don't really know if we go after Victor Martinez. He's another guy whose name's been attached. Victor Martinez is 36.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys heard this. He's 36 and he wants a 4-year deal.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like,
you think he'd be going like year to year.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. The dude hit. The dude can still hit. But I mean, like, for me, like Levi said, I give him like 1-year deal, high salary. You know what I mean? Because like the numbers are still there, so he still deserves to get paid.
Yeah.
But like I would go like 1 year, like 12 million, 13 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like something like that, and then fuck it if he doesn't pan out, if it doesn't happen, and he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't think like that. He obviously wants multiple years. So I don't really know if I want to pay Victor Martinez that when he's 39 years old. So,
no.
Yeah. So the DH is another one, and then I do think we need another starter. But like I mentioned to Levi with the Cubs, kind of same situation. I don't think we're going to go crazy signing a starting pitcher. The White Sox aren't going to get one of those top guns. Your Scherzer, your Lester, your Shields, your Samardzija. They're not going to get one of those guys. If they get anybody, it'll be somebody who's near the back of the rotation. So, and I haven't like even I mentioned Brandon McCarthy earlier for the Cubs. He might even be a little bit. He might even be too good. I hate to say it. Like I'm thinking somebody more who's like in the 4th or 5th starter. Role. And I have to look at the list. I don't know entirely who's out there. There might be some projects out
Justin
there.
Masterson is out there.
Masterson could do it.
He could be a sneaky
Masterson
dude in the back end of his career.
You guys seen? He's a big boy, man. Masterson.
Is he?
Yeah, he's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could. He's one of those guys that's kind of poised for a bounce back. So.
He's always kind of he's always teased that he could be a front end guy.
Yeah, and that's what they wanted him to be in Cleveland, and it didn't really happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would be interested in him. If it was like I said, it was like a 1 year deal or 2 year deal, maybe just to see how he bounces back, maybe build up his value again. So those, to me, it's we get a corner outfielder and we get a DH, and then whatever else happens. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Markakis, I definitely hope that move happens. Cool. Excellent. Well, we're talking about, I want to start with this segue for our second half of the show here. It's been some exciting news in Chicago, not necessarily on the south side, but on the north side. There's a guy that's kind of wearing glasses like this, who
I thought those were his signature models.
They might be.
Yeah,
His are a little thinner than a little bit not as wide frames as mine, but anyway, the Ira Glass of baseball managers now has landed in Chicago.
Yeah.
So Levi, what do you think about this, man? Are you excited?
Yeah, Joe Madden.
I know.
The Chicago Cubs. I love it personally, not just because he's a really good manager, but I've always liked characters for managers, and I think that in the last few years we haven't had as many characters in baseball managing wise as we need. And by no means was Rick Renteria a bad coach. I mean, he did a lot with a lot of those young players.
Right.
It was nice that he was bilingual. He could speak Spanish to all of those Latin American players.
That goes a long way.
It does.
Baseball. Yeah.
It was just almost too big of a deal that the Cubs couldn't. You know what I mean? They had to do it.
Yeah. I mean, they made a splash.
Had to. Yeah.
Yeah, they made a splash.
Yeah.
And Tampa seems like they're kind of, after having some really good years there for a while, they're kind of on the decline now.
Yeah, I would say absolutely.
So, especially with their GM left, Friedman, he went to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And that was actually the clause that let us get Joe Madden.
Oh, no kidding.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, Beans, he left and went to the Dodgers. There was a clause in Madden's contract that he could then be released from his.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously those guys were tight. Yeah, and Madden seems like a pretty forward-thinking guy. Like he's not. He's open to the sabermetrics thing. I think. It's really just like kind of a down-to-earth guy. Wants all the players to like him. Mm-hmm.
Renaissance man.
Yeah. He there's all kinds of stories if you search the web about him and like exotic animals into the clubhouse to try and break the ice a little bit with players, and he's known for like dressing up during road trips. Like I guess there was like a Woodstock themed road trip. Like one of the last road trips with the Rays, he was like dressed as a hippie the whole time.
Yeah.
And stuff.
He seems like the manager that would have a dugout in the dugout. But anyway,
Well done.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how he does. Hopefully he can shape some of the young Cubs players the way he has the Rays.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a good way to start your off season, that's for sure. Yeah. 5-year deal too, so obviously I assume there's probably, I don't know if it was 4 years. I think it was just a flat out 5 years. So that's a big contract for a manager.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I think this is it. I think the team of Theo and Joe Madden. This is what brings the World Series back to the north side.
I hope you're right. Yeah, I absolutely hope you're right. And I just hope it's all worth it.
Yeah. Right.
It's like if we're still talking in 3 or 4 years about how the Cubs haven't won a World Series or been in the playoffs, it'll be really disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the move though, man. It's sorry for Renteria, but
Some websites are calling it the biggest free agent move of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be like a transformative move,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I mean, it really could, yeah. Mm-hmm. It was it might be like bigger than any player you acquire this offseason, you know?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think it will, yeah. Just
Good
as
deal.
important.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that, address it first. So that's exciting stuff. But we're also going to talk a little bit now about managers, including some famous managers, as well as some managers in rock and roll. So, Jonathan, we'll go to you, and then we'll go back to Levi, and then I can take it then. Do you want to talk us about? We'll do the baseball and the rock and roll. I think in the same.
Okay.
In the same. The same round. So yeah, let it rip, man. What do you? Who was your baseball manager of choice? This is kind of maybe a manager that sticks out to you or your favorite manager.
Yeah. I mean, I think showing character means a lot for a manager. But at the same time, managers are weirdos, man.
Yeah.
It's like even a guy like Joe Madden, who's Renaissance man. He knows this. As soon as if I see him if I see him in a restaurant and I don't know who he is, and as soon as he tells me he's a baseball manager, I'm immediately skeptical, as if he's like a Jehovah's Witness or something. like everything he says after that is colored in that fact.
Yeah.
And so. The idea of managers, and they're always so staunch and predictable in many ways, really makes it important for when a guy shows character, whether it be like Jim Leland smoking heaters in the dugout, like sneaking heaters, or Bobby Valentine, with the incognito mustache after he got kicked out of the game. Though I was reading about Cubs manager Frank Chance in the early 1900s, part of the Cubs dynasty then. He was a player manager, and he the Cubs were doing poorly in one of the World Series after winning two. So it was 1909 World Series, and it went back to Chicago. He was being heckled on his way to the ballpark. It wasn't Wrigley at that point. On his way to the ballpark, he got out and attacked the dude that was heckling him. It's like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You can't do that nowadays.
That stuff before
no, you can't get away with that.
Yeah. So that's some cool stuff there. But to get back to the Royals, though, the most famous manager in the Midwest right now is definitely Ned Yost. The dude has his own hashtag Yosted, for when questionable decisions are made to the detriment of his own team. But Ned Yost was first of all most famous for the fact that he was fired by the Brewers when they had a tie for the wild card. I forget what year it was. The Brewers were tied for the wild card, and he was fired, which is like in the history of baseball. I think that's the only time that's ever happened. The manager was fired when he was tied.
It's not like the Brewers make the playoffs that often,
No,
But
they had many ups and downs over those years, and so. But he's an interesting guy because he's really staunch in his style. Pitchers have very specific innings. With the Royals, it was the famous HDH, which is Herrera, Davis, and Holland, and they would be the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. But as a result, when a guy's in a jam in the 6th inning, instead Ned Yost won't go to Herrera yet because he can't pitch in the 6th. You can't bring him in the 6th. So he brings in, like the 10th best bullpen pitcher to blow the game for him. Right. At one point in the season, Ned was complaining about the small crowds at the K, which if he thought about the history of the last 30 years, he would have understood probably a little bit more. And then he complained that the team didn't perform well in front of the big crowds because eventually the Tigers came to town and the Royals threw up on their shoes, and he said that it's, too big a crowd, and so it's like, okay, Ned, tell us how many people you want to be there. Like, I want 22,500 people there.
He wants it crowded but comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Need more people up in section 412. And so that was pretty interesting. Of course, in the playoffs, he was most known for his bunting, calls for bunting, and because he had several. I think in one game against the Angels or the Orioles, he had 4 bunts, and it was a wild card game. I think 4 bunts and 7 steals, and so all of a sudden the Royals were the bunting and stealing team. And even his card, there was a card because he was on the '82 Brewers that went to the World Series and lost to the Cardinals. His '82 Brewers card is him bunting, and there were giant versions of that card blown up as signs at the K. Like, people were holding them up, and there was even a girl on Halloween who posted her Halloween costume was the outline of the '82 Topps card with the bottom of Ned Yost, but she had the Brewers jersey on, and she had a bat, and she was bunting. So, like, Ned Yost is like a phenomenon for good and bad, because at some point Yosted, instead of meaning bad to the detriment of the Royals during the World Series, meant he made poor decisions that for some reason still worked out for the Royals. And so when a team got Yosted, it was because Ned Yost made a really questionable decision that, like, his black magic gave him the fortune to help the Royals win.
A lot of people think he somehow had that book from Back to the Future where he could, like...
the almanac,
like,
the sports
like,
almanac.
What the hell is Ned Yost doing? It's like, no, I'm telling you, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even because when they were in the World Series, they went. It's like, okay, he's got World Series, he's got National League experience, so he'll know how to do, he'll know how to manage in a National League park, and but he pulled a double switch in San Francisco that just blew everybody's mind because it made no sense.
Yeah.
At one point, he let Kelvin Herrera bat. Gerard Dyson got on first, and Gerard Dyson managed to get on, and as a result, Kelvin Herrera, who had closed out the previous inning because Ned was open to bringing him in before the 7th, he wanted him to carry over into the next inning, and Ned was quoted as so Kelvin Herrera batted and was awful swinging, and he said, "I was hoping Dyson would make an out there, but he steps up and foils my plan and gets a hit." He was hoping his player would make an out, he admitted. Even after they were down, or I'm sorry, that the Giants tied up the series 2-2. He said, "We got our tails whipped today, but it's game 4 of the World Series. How much more fun can that be? There's nothing better in the world. I've never felt so good about getting my tail whooped in my life because I'm sitting here thinking it's game 4. It's tied 2-2.
He's endearing. Yeah, he's definitely an endearing guy.
He is, and he's he was good friends with Dale Earnhardt, and that's why he wears number 3. And so he goes hunting and things like that, and so he's pretty down to earth, I imagine. But he's coached more games than any other Royals manager in the history of the franchise, and I don't know. He could take this team to 2 more World Series, or he could be fired in 2 years. I have no idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely.
So Ned Yost, yeah.
Right. You want? Actually, let's mix it up a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stick with the baseball and then go to the music. I'm pulling a Ned Yost move here.
Audible.
I was just Yosted.
Yeah, right. So Levi, what about you, man? Who's your memorable manager?
This was really easy for me growing up as a Cub fan, and it's Don Zimmer. Because,
rest in peace, man.
In 1989, I would have been 8 years old, and he was the coach of what was then hailed as the Boys of Zimmer. And what that was basically a team that was picked to finish last ended up winning the division, which the Cubs were in the East at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up winning the Manager of the Year award that year as well. And it just brings back really good memories of me being a kid with all those '89 players, because you had Sandberg and Dawson. It was Mark Grace's rookie year.
Sean Dunston.
Sean Dunston, Jerome Walton's Rookie of the Year campaign was that year. Dwight Smith.
He finished second. He was, I think, second place Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, so it was a great time to be a Cubs fan. It did not last. He only coached the Cubs in '88, '89, and '90, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a weird fact is, though, he was the last two, some of the most important Cubs playoff games. In '89, he was the manager, and in '84, when the Cubs almost made the World Series, were basically a game away from getting to the World Series, he was the third base coach for the Cubs that year in '84.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. Was he somewhere in between then, third base and manager? Was he somewhere else?
Yeah, I believe he bounced around. He was the coach for a lot of different teams, whether it was a manager or as a bench coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, there's numerous histories. He was all over the place.
After the Cubs, he was with the Yankees for a while, and then he was with Tampa for a while.
Yeah, Red Sox.
Yeah.
So yeah, he definitely was kind of like the Gaylord Perry of managers. He bounced around a lot. It's hard to forget his demeanor. He was, totally basically bald, shaved head.
Yeah.
Always had a huge thing of either gum or chew in his mouth.
Probably both.
And everybody called him Popeye. So it was he was like almost a cartoon character to a young child. So.
Yeah,
totally. Fun dude. He was one of those guys that kind of like Jim Leyland, when they were 50, they looked like they were 80. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
They wore it well.
Yeah, definitely. Sparky Anderson, you see baseball cards of Sparky Anderson, you're like, he's 38 years old there. It's like, what?
No. Like silver hair and crackly face.
The leathery face. Looks like Lance Henriksen or something. Anyway,
Levi, it's funny you mentioned that '89 team, because before this year's Royals team, that '89 Cubs team was probably the team I watched the most games of in one season. Before this year, because every day that summer I would turn on the Cubs on WGN after I'm done watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and watch the Cubs game, and oh man, that was an awesome summer.
Oh yeah, man, they were really good. It was just one of many times they had my hopes up really high.
Yeah. He was he was a cartoon character, man. And unfortunately, there was that incident with Pedro. That's
Pedro
never
Martinez, beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, it's never good. But but Don
he was
Zimmer,
very contrite after that happened.
He knew that he was being aggressive. He knew he couldn't just play "I'm a feeble old man" sort of card.
He got really emotional during the press conference. It was one of the more kind of honest baseball moments.
Right.
He was.
Yeah.
He seemed embarrassed over what he did.
Yeah. Well, everybody should have.
Right.
Based on, but it was nice.
And I think it goes to show. I mean, it's just another example. He was always from the gut, whether it was his coaching or he wanted to stick up for his players or whatever.
Or if he's in tears the next day at the press conference, It
was always from the gut with Don Zimmer.
Yeah.
Right. Well, good choices there, guys. My choice, this was a pretty obvious one for me as well. The only guy to bring my team a World Series in my lifetime, and actually a lot of people's lifetimes, he's not managing right now, and I think probably he's pretty toxic, and he probably never will manage again, and that's Ozzie Guillen. He obviously a pretty divisive figure around baseball, but certainly an entertaining one nonetheless. I'm going to read one quote here that I found. This is Ozzie talking about Bart, and because not only was he, he was obviously he could be abrasive. He sort of had that whole machismo thing sometimes, which got a little tiring. But he would just say some really weird stuff too. This is a quote from 2009, and he's talking about Bartolo Colon, all right? He says, "I worry about Colon because Colon was a big-time Michael Jackson fan. He might watch the TV and cry all day long. Maybe he's in L.A. at his funeral because I can't find him. When he gets to Charlotte, Oni, which is Ozzy's son, will call me and say he's there. Nobody knows how big of a Jackson fan Colon was. I'm serious. He might be depressed a little bit. So I guess this was when Bartolo Colon, I guess, was missing for a little while. Like the White Sox signed Colon back in 2009, and he pitched a couple games. He was supposed to go start, but like nobody knew where he was. So Ozzy was equating that with him being a Michael Jackson fan when Michael Jackson died that summer. So anyway, so he's a weird dude, and he, like I said, he was really he was very entertaining, and probably, for the 8 years I think that he was in Chicago, always a good soundbite. Sometimes an offensive soundbite. Him and the back and forth between him and Jay Mariotti was pretty epic. And also Ozzy's like lack of command over the English language made him kind of even more endearing. Like, he wouldn't call Jay Mariotti garbage. He would call him a garbage. He's like Jay Mariotti is a garbage. All right. So yeah, and it got a little bit old in Chicago near the end. He left after 2011, joined the Marlins right away. But yeah, those last 3 years or so in Chicago got a little bit old. I mean, the team was obviously struggling a little bit, but he was kind of doing this, like threatening to retire all the time, like during press conferences, threatening to quit. And so he did wear out his welcome after building up all that goodwill with winning the World Series. But nonetheless, he's memorable to me because I just, you like characters in baseball, whether they're imperfect, certainly, but they're still characters. And obviously the guy just has balls, or he just doesn't even think about what he's saying, because to manage in Miami and to say you love Fidel Castro, like what are you doing?
What you're trying to do is get a free case of cigars delivered to the clubhouse door.
I guess
is what you're doing.
Yeah.
But
so
there's a better way to go about it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So and he just became toxic after that. That whole Miami thing where they brought in him and all those free agents, that just turned out to be a disaster. So
I in the '87 Topps. I don't know if you noticed, but he is like skinny.
Oh, he's rail thin. Yeah.
Yeah, I never realized that about him.
He was a little guy, man.
Yeah, he was like a little scrawny shortstop.
Yeah, now he's like kind of bloated, But
I never realized that.
Yeah. He also said that during the Marlins, when he was managing the Marlins that one year, every road series he said he was drunk. He said afterwards. Yeah. So, and it's weird because it's not weird. He's toxic. You haven't heard his name mentioned for any jobs after that Marlins debacle.
Yeah.
If he were to come back, it'd have to be, I think, kind of starting out small and rebuilding his reputation, like go with a minor league gig or go with, being a bench coach or something. So I don't really know what his aspirations are at this point. I think he wants to get back in the game, from what I gather. He tweets that he would manage again and things like that. But I think he's kind of toxic at this point.
Oh yeah.
So that's Ozzy is my choice. And then I'll segue into managers of rock and roll. This one was a little tougher to pin down for me. But the guy that I came up with is probably one of the more famous rock managers of the 1970s. Malcolm McLaren, to me, is the quintessential rock and roll manager. He was a guy that knew how to create a spectacle. When the Sex Pistols were on the boat for God Save the Queen, he engineered all that. He knew how to really create buzz around a band that, while I think the Sex Pistols are awesome, there really wasn't like a lot of talent there. Like Sid Vicious, Sid Vicious didn't really even know how to play the bass when the Sex Pistols started. So he was always really upfront about how crass, just the crass commercialism of his craft, which if somebody's upfront about it, I can kind of respect them for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if they try to sneak around it and pretend like they have integrity, he's just like, no, I'm in this to, like, it's the great rock and roll swindle, baby. Like, I'm in this to make as much money as I can. He owned a sex shop in London, and he managed Adam Ant for a little while. He also was he wasn't a manager, but he kind of helped craft, like, the New York Dolls sort of craft their style. Like, he went to America in the early 70s. He met them, and he was kind of the one that told them to, like, glam it out as much as they can. So he was important, in really, like, 3 musical movements, like glam, punk, and new wave. He played a hand in different artists for all those. And he actually, one other little tidbit I found out, he offered to manage the Red Hot Chili Peppers, like, in the mid 80s, like, before they really took off, like, previous, they said no. He wanted them to wear, like, all neon outfits and play really stripped down music. So they said no. So he was a very image conscious guy.
They met George Clinton and were like, that's the guy.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So just a real character, I mean, he, just British to the max too, So yeah, he was when we said rock and roll managers, was the first guy that came to mind for me. So
yeah,
Malcolm McLaren is my choice.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was really easy because I've always thought of him as the quintessential rock manager, and that's Peter Grant of Led Zeppelin.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a hulking beast of a guy. He's like over 6 feet tall, over 300 pounds. And so he was intimidating, and he's basically credited as being the first manager that actually got the bands paid what they were owed.
Yeah. Right.
Like, it used to be basically a system of where the bands toured and toured and toured and made no money.
Yeah.
And that's actually how he got his start, was in 1968, the Yardbirds called him. And we're like, man, we're on the road constantly, yet, like, our bank account's basically empty.
Yeah, and that was the case for a lot of bands back then. Yeah.
So he worked with them and got it to where they were becoming, more well-paid, and then they dissolved. And from that, Led Zeppelin was born. And so he became the manager of Led Zeppelin on a gentleman's agreement, just a handshake. That's all Peter Grant and Led Zeppelin, that's all they ever had. There was never a written contract between them, always just a gentleman's agreement. So he's known for also being one of the first that he pushed everyone away. He was like, it's my job as manager to just make everybody leave the band alone so they can do what they do. And at that time, it was like, the manager controlled the bands, basically, at that time. And so it was pretty revolutionary for that. He was like, the band will do what they do, just leave it up to the band. They're the ones that are going to help all of us make money. Just let the band be the band. Yeah,
give them room to create. That's what a good manager does. They give them, you work, you do what you need to do for them, and then you give them the room to create. Yeah.
He also was then the manager for Bad Company as well. A lot of the Swan Song artists. He helped found Swan Song Records along with Zeppelin.
Right.
So, I just always thought there's great stories if you go on the internet, and some of them are kind of X-rated. I think he's involved with the legendary shark story. I don't know.
Everybody knows that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want some wild, crazy stories about Peter Grant, you can find them. I don't know if we can talk about them here.
Yeah. Great singing and song remains the same, too, with him.
Oh, yeah.
At his feistiest.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and he was also, that was another thing he was first known for, was being adamantly against anything bootleg.
Yeah.
Like, if he saw someone recording a show out in the crowd, he would, like, pour water on their gear or, like, beat them up, or, you know what I mean? The scene in Song Remains the Same. I think he's bitching about T-shirts.
Bootleg T-shirts. Yeah.
Someone selling bootleg T-shirts. He's like, I demand answers.
Yeah. Good stuff, man.
Yeah, Don Arden was a guy who was pretty similar in some of his aggression. He in his early days, there was one of his lesser known early bands. They one of the guys asked him about why he was getting paid so little, and Arden just went ahead and like held him over a balcony. and
he was Suge Knight before Suge Knight.
Oh, totally. And it wasn't the first guy. There was another guy. So Arden goes on to manage the Small Faces in the mid 60s, and who he got their first single to top the charts through payola, basically, but through chart fixing. So it wasn't even like payola; it was just straight up fixing. And so he took the Small Faces places, and they were a pretty significant band, though they were only making like £20 a week, and so they wanted to see the royalty statements. The Small Faces did, and he countered by informing all of their parents that they were drug addicts. So he was quick to pull the trigger anytime he thought there was a little discontent. Of course, he was also the father of Sharon Osbourne. He was a manager of Ozzy and Black Sabbath. And Sharon began dating Ozzy and stole him away from her own father to manage him. And there was a weird story where the next time she visited him, she was pregnant at the time, and Don Arden had some pretty vicious dogs that attacked her, and she lost the child. Yeah, so it's like, geez, what the hell?
And there's a lot of love in that family. Yeah. Right. Oh,
and they were pretty estranged for a while until there was a reunion on the Osbournes back in the early 2000s. I'm sure they both saw the money making potential in that reunion. Right. But there was another guy, Robert Stigwood, who was the manager of Cream and Bee Gees. Yeah. He even though he had never met the Small Faces, he for some reason he put it out there that they were discontent with Arden as their manager, which apparently they probably were, but he was throwing that out there because Stigwood wanted to manage him, and immediately Arden and four goons went over to Stigwood's office and hung him off a fourth floor balcony. So the dude didn't mess around. He bought Howard Hughes' mansion as well. Went on to mansion ELO as well. So he got it done.
Moved before ELO too, so he obviously had a relationship with Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, right, exactly. And he died a few years ago, but it sounded like they did reconcile. He reconciled with Sharon a little bit. So
Sharon never managed Sabbath, right? She just managed
Ozzy.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So rock and roll managers are interesting because it's this industry where it's all about, rebellion and against the man and like doing things however we want to do it and making it up along the way. But then it's like, well, we still need to make money somehow. Yeah. And so the idea of the kind of person it takes to be a manager of a rock and roll band means you're going to have some serious characters in there. In the early days, now it's a bit more regulated and you can kind of, even though it's the wild, wild west out there in some ways with downloading and pirating, that you don't quite get the characters anymore. But in the early days, it took a special type of person to be a rock and roll manager.
Yeah, I won't say who the artist was, but one of their former managers, and this is an artist I've worked with as a stagehand, and this is their current stage manager telling us, they we're at like a truck stop or a rest area. They've got, you know, a couple tour buses with the band and the crew and everything. And all of a sudden, like, SWAT teams descend the buses. And the manager, like the stage manager for the tour, was like wanted in multiple states for like forgery and fraud, and so it still happens. There are still sketchy band managers out there.
Good. That's comforting to know.
Reassuring. Rock and roll's still alive.
Yeah, I guess the guy had like a briefcase full of drugs and stuff, and like guns on him when they got on the bus.
Awesome.
Good stuff, boys. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah, man, another fun episode. So I enjoyed it. So good times definitely. And make sure, for those of you that are out there on social media, make sure you follow us on Twitter
at Rock and
our
Shoe.
Page at Rock and Shoe.
Yes.
Like our Facebook page. Just type in Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo on the Facebook in the search bar on Facebook, and you'll find us there. And we'll be giving away baseball cards and having a lot of fun on both of those sites. So please check us out.
And more Show Your Cards episodes coming soon.
More Show Your Cards episodes are coming as well. Yeah. So looking forward to that. And thanks for listening, and have a good night, everybody. Later.
See ya.